Hi. So in this module we have been talking about two major things: data cleansing, so preparing and extending data, and schemas. Schemas that help to ensure good data quality because they are kind of extra constraint that apply on the data that is flowing into your system. And one of common approaches to enforce this schema is not to write a lot of data processing logic for JSON or for CSV files, so for the semi-structured files, but for the binary file formats that are natively supporting schemas. And there is a subtle difference between them because they are kind of serialized representation for the data, but when it comes to JSON or CSV, of course, they are human readable format. So you can take each row and with your eye see what is the content of each row of each event. On the other hand, when you take binary file formats, as the name indicates, it's binary. So it's binary representation of the data that you will not necessarily visualize as it. You will need extra tools to understand it, to see what's happening. So it's a small drawback, but you will see later in this lesson that it's only one small tiny drawback among many advantages. And I think that the first input will be this comparison table. The comparison table, when you can see the different technologies for binary and non-binary format, and also implications. And for example, the worst implication for binary format for me is this human readability. As I said, when you are debugging some data coming into your stream, you take each row, you analyze the content, you do it pretty quickly. Even if you do it from a customer, you take data as it and maybe you print on your screen. On the other hand, when you work with binary formats, you will always require some extra dependency, either as an online tool, either an extra library to deserialize the data and to visualize it much better. On the other hand, the next 3 points are great proofs for superiority of binary formats for me. The first one is the schema. The schema can be enforced. Remember schema registry. Schema registry can also work for JSON, but more natively it works with Apache Avro. Apache Avro was kind of historical first format supported in schema registry, and for me it's quite of natural link between these two parts. Schema optimization, of course, is also something very important. When you have a JSON files, for example, you have the schema defined in each row. So it gives you flexibility because you can add or remove attributes and have the schema non-consistent if you want. But on the other hand, if you want a schema consistent, you will define each attribute for each row. By attributes, I mean key and value. On the other hand, for binary file formats, since the data organization in the storage is different, a little bit different, you will often either include the schema from the schema registry, or instead you will keep the schema definition in the header of the file and later let only the values in the body, meaning that the data will be should be at least much more smaller. And finally, there is the code generation. JSON is semi-structured, CSV also, so maybe there are some code generators, but they are not much reliable for me than for the binary file formats where the schema is enforced. When you have some static definition of the schema, and when you run code generation, it will generate you the POJO class or any case class for your processing logic out of the box. So to support a bit my sayings, there is a schema a JSON example, so you can see that we are repeating all the attributes each time. And on the other hand, when we have Apache Avro example for the binary file format, we define the schema once in the beginning of the file, and later we write each row just with the values, and the schema framework, the binary file formats framework like Apache Avro will figure out how to make sense of these single lines of values. And another important part is that these are real schema, so it's strongly typed. You can see that we have types names, There is also link between the values and the schema, and there is of course less data because we define the schema only once. And that's all for this lesson. So I think you can enforce schemas for JSON or for CSV files, but it will require much more effort on your data processing side because by definition these formats are semi-structured. So there is a structure but is not enforced anyhow by these file formats. On the other hand, when you use Apache Avro or Protobuf, there are formats relying on some schema definition. So natively, this is this schema somewhere, and I think you will feel more secure, more safe when working with that kind of data. So thanks for watching and see you in the next lesson.